Leaf and Tendril by John Burroughs. The Art of Seeing Things. I do not propose to attempt to tell my reader how to see things, but only to talk about the art of seeing things, as one might talk of any other art. One might discourse about the art of poetry, or of painting, or of oratory, without any hope of making one's readers or hearers poets, or painters, or orators. The science of anything may be taught or acquired by study. The art of it comes by practice or inspiration. The art of seeing things is not something that may be conveyed in rules and precepts. It is a matter vital in the eye and ear, yea, in the mind and soul, of which these are the organs. I have as little hope of being able to tell the reader how to see things as I would have in trying to tell him how to fall in love or to enjoy his dinner. Either he does or he does not, and that is about all there is of it. Some people seem born with eyes in their heads, and some others with buttons or painted marbles, and no amount of science can make the one equal to the other in the art of seeing things. The great mass of mankind are, in this respect, like the rank and file of an army. They fire vaguely in the direction of the enemy, and if they hit, it is more a matter of chance than of accurate aim. But here and there is the keen-eyed observer. He is the sharpshooter. His eye selects and discriminates. His purpose goes to the mark. Even the successful angler seems born and not made. He appears to know instinctively the ways of a trout. The secret is, no doubt, love of the sport. Love sharpens the eye, the ear, the touch. It quickens the feet, it steadies the hand, it arms against the wet and the cold. What we love to do, that we do well. To know is not all. It is only half. To love is the other half. Wordsworth's poet was contented if he might enjoy the things which others understood. This is generally the attitude of the young and of the poetic nature. The man of science, on the other hand, is contented if he may understand the things that others enjoy, that is his enjoyment. Contemplation and absorption for the one, investigation and classification for the other. We probably all have, in varying degrees, one or the other of these ways of enjoying nature, either the sympathetic and emotional enjoyment of her which the young and the artistic and the poetic temperament have, or the enjoyment through our knowing faculties afforded by natural science. Or it may be the two combined, as they certainly were in such a man as Tendril. But nothing can take the place of love. Love is the measure of life. Only so far as we love do we really live. The variety of our interests, the width of our sympathies, the susceptibilities of our hearts, if these do not measure our lives, what does? As the years go by, we are all of us more or less subject to two dangers, the danger of petrifaction and the danger of putrefaction. Either that we shall become hard and callous, crusted over with customs and conventions till no new ray of light or of joy can reach us, or that we shall become lax and disorganized, losing our grip upon the real and vital sources of happiness and power. Now there is no preservative and antiseptic, nothing that keeps one's heart young, like love, like sympathy, like giving oneself with enthusiasm to some worthy thing or cause. If I were to name the three most precious resources of life, I should say books, friends, and nature. And the greatest of these, at least the most constant and always at hand, is nature. Nature we have always with us, an inexhaustible storehouse of that which moves the heart, appeals to the mind, and fires the imagination. Health to the body, a stimulus to the intellect, and joy to the soul. To the scientist, nature is a storehouse of facts, laws, processes. To the artist, she is a storehouse of pictures. To the poet, she is a storehouse of images, fancies, a storehouse of inspiration. To the moralist, she is a storehouse of precepts and parables. To all, she may be a source of knowledge and joy. There is nothing in which people differ more than in the powers of observation. Some are only half alive to what is going on around them. Others, again, are keenly alive. Their intelligence, their powers of recognition are in full force in eye and ear at all times. They see and hear everything, whether it directly concerns them or not. They never pass unseen a familiar face on the street. They are never oblivious of any interesting feature or sound or object in the earth or sky about them. Their power of attention is always on the alert, not by conscious effort, but by natural habit and disposition. Their perceptive faculties may be said to be always on duty. They turn to the outward world a more highly sensitized mind than other people. The things that pass before them are caught and individualized instantly. If they visit new countries, they see the characteristic features of the people and scenery at once. The impression is never blurred or confused. Their powers of observation suggest the sight and scent of wild animals, only whereas it is fear that sharpens the one, it is love and curiosity that sharpens the other. The mother turkey with her brood sees the hawk when it is a mere speck against the sky. She is, in her solicitude for her young, thinking of hawks, and is on guard against them. Fear makes keen her eye. The hunter does not see the hawk till his attention is thus called to it by the turkey, because his interests are not endangered. But he outsees the wild creatures of the plain and mountain, the elk, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. He makes it his business to look for them, and his eyes carry farther than do theirs. We may see coarsely and vaguely, as most people do, noting only masses and unusual appearances, or we may see finely and discriminately, taking in the minute and the specific. In a collection of stuffed birds the other day, I observed that a wood thrush was mounted as in the act of song, its open beak pointing straight to the zenith. The taxidermist had not seen truly. The thrush sings with its beak but slightly elevated. Who has not seen a red squirrel or gray squirrel running up and down the trunk of a tree? But probably very few have noticed the position of the hind feet is the reverse in the one case from what it is in the other. In descending, they are extended to the rear, the toenails hooking to the bark, checking and controlling the fall. In most pictures, the feet are shown well drawn up under the body in both cases. People who discourse pleasantly and accurately about the birds and flowers and external nature generally are not invariably good observers. In their walks, do they see anything they did not come out to see? Is there any spontaneous or unpremeditated seeing? Do they make discoveries? Any bird or creature may be hunted down, any nest discovered if you lay siege to it. But to find what you are not looking for, to catch the shy winks and gestures on every side, to see all the byplay going on around you, missing no significant note or movement, penetrating every screen with your eye beams, that is to be an observer. That is to have an eye practiced like a blind man's touch. A touch that can distinguish a white horse from a black. A detective eye that reads the faintest signs. When Thoreau was at Cape Cod, he noticed that the horses there had a certain muscle in their hips inordinately developed by reason of the insecure footing in the ever-yielding sand. Thoreau's vision at times fitted things closely. During some great fete in Paris, the Empress Eugenie and Queen Victoria were both present. A reporter noticed that when the royal personages came to sit down, Eugenie looked behind her before doing so to see that the chair was really there. But Victoria seated herself without the backward glance, knowing there must be a seat ready. There always had been, and there always would be for her. The correspondent inferred that the incident showed the difference between both royalty and hastily made royalty. I wonder how many persons in the vast assembly made this observation. Probably very few. It denoted a gift for seeing things. If our powers of observation were quick and sure enough, no doubt we should see through most of the tricks of the sleight of hand man. He fools us because his hand is more dexterous than our eye. He captures our attention and then commands us to see only what he wishes us to see. In the field of natural history, things escape us because the actors are small and the stage is very large and more or less veiled and obstructed. The movement is quick across a background that tends to conceal rather than expose it. In the printed page, the white paper plays quite as important a part as the type and the ink, but the book of nature is on a different plan. The page rarely presents a contrast of black and white, or even black and brown, but only of similar tints, gray upon gray, green upon green, or drab upon brown. By a close observer, I do not mean a minute cold-blooded specialist, a fingering slave, one who would peep and botanize upon his mother's grave, but a man who looks closely and steadily at nature and notes the individual features of tree and rock and field, and allows no subtle flavor of the night or day or the place and the season to escape him. His senses are so delicate that in his evening walk he feels the warm and the cool streaks in the air. His nose detects the most fugitive odors, his eyes the most furtive sounds. As he stands musing in the April twilight, he hears that fine, elusive stir and rustle made by the angleworms reaching out from their holes for leaves and grasses. He hears the whistling wings of the woodcock as it goes swiftly by him in the dusk. He hears the call of the killdee come down out of the March sky. He hears far above him in the early morning the squeaking cackle of the arriving blackbirds pushing north. He hears the soft, prolonged, lulling call of the little owl in the cedars in the early spring twilight. He hears at night the roar of the distant waterfall, the rumble of the train miles across the country when the air is hollow. Before a storm, he notes how distant objects stand out and are brought near on those brilliant days that we call weather breeders. When the mercury is at 0 or lower, he notes how the passing trains hiss and simmer as if the rails or wheels were red hot. He reads the subtle signs of weather. The stars at night forecast the coming day to him. The clouds at evening and at mornings are a sign. He knows there is the wet weather diethys and the dry weather diethys, or as Goethe said, water affirmative and water negative, and he interprets the symptoms accordingly. He is keenly alive to all outward impressions. When he descends from the hill in the autumn twilight, he notes the cooler air of the valley like a lake about him. He notes how, at other seasons, the cooler air at times settles down between the mountains, like a vast body of water as shown by the level line of the fog or the frost upon the trees. The modern man looks at nature with an eye of sympathy and love, where the earlier man looked with an eye of fear and superstition. Hence he sees more closely and accurately. Science has made his eyes steady and clear. To a hasty traveler through the land, the farms and country homes all seem much alike, but to the people born and reared there, what a difference! They have read the fine print that escapes the hurried eye, and that is so full of meaning. Every horizon line, every curve in hill or valley, every tree and rock and spring run, every turn in the road and vista in the landscape, has its special features and makes its own impression. Scott wrote in his journal, "Nothing is so tiresome as walking through some beautiful scene with a minute philosopher, a botanist, or a pebble-gatherer, who is eternally calling your attention from the grand features of the natural picture to look at grasses and chucky stains." No doubt Scott's large, generous way of looking at things kindles the imagination and touches the sentiments more than does this minute way of specialist. The nature that Scott gives us, like the air and the water that all may absorb, while that the specialist gives us is much more like some particular element or substance that only the few can appropriate. But Scott had his specialties too, the specialties of the sportsman. He was the first to see the hare's eyes as she sat in her form, and he knew the ways of grouse and pheasants and trout. The ideal observer turns the enthusiasm of the sportsman into the channels of natural history and brings home a finer game than ever fell to shot or bullet. He too has an eye for the fox and the rabbit and the migrating waterfowl, but he sees them with loving and not with murderous eyes. So far as seeing things as an art, it is the art of keeping your eyes and ears open. The art of nature is all in the direction of concealment. The birds, the animals, all the wild creatures, for the most part, try to elude your observation. The art of the bird is to hide her nest. The art of the game you are in quest of is to make itself invisible. The flower seeks to attract the bee and the moth by its color and perfume because they are of service to it, but I presume it would hide from the excursionists and the picnickers if it could because they extirpate it. Power of attention and a mind sensitive to outward objects, in these lies the secret of seeing things. Can you bring all your faculties to the front, like a house with many faces at the doors and windows? Or do you live retired within yourself, shut up in your own meditations? The thinker puts all the powers of his mind in reflection. The observer puts all the powers of his mind in perception. Every faculty is directed outward. The whole mind sees through the eye and hears through the ear. He has an objective turn of mind as opposed to a subjective. A person with the latter turn of mind sees little. If you are occupied with your own thoughts, you may go through a museum of curiosities and observe nothing. Of course, one's powers of observation may be cultivated as well as anything else. The senses of seeing and hearing may be quickened and trained as well as the sense of touch. Blind persons come to be marvelously acute in their powers of touch. Their feet find the path and keep it. They come to know the lay of the land through this sense and recognize the roads and surfaces they have once traveled over. Helen Keller reads your speech by putting her hand upon your lips and is thrilled by the music of an instrument through the same sense of touch. The perceptions of school children should be trained as well as their powers of reflection and memory. A teacher in Connecticut, Miss Aiken, whose work on mind training I commend to all teachers, has hit upon a simple and ingenious method of doing this. She has a revolving blackboard upon which she writes various figures, numbers, words, sentences, which she exposes to the view of the class for 1 or 2 or 3 seconds, as the case may be, and then asks them to copy or repeat what was written. In time they become astonishingly quick, especially the girls, and can take in a multitude of things at a glance. Detectives, I am told, are trained after a similar method. A man is led quickly by a show window, for instance, and asked to name and describe the objects he saw there. Life itself is, of course, more or less a school of this kind, but the power of concentrated attention in most persons needs stimulating. Here comes in the benefit of manual training schools. To do a thing, to make something, the powers of the mind must be focused. A boy in building a boat will get something that all the books in the world cannot give him: the concrete, the definite, the discipline of real things. The educational values that lie here are not enough appreciated.